Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Inferno cast, specifically episode number 039. I am Inferno Fox, host of the podcast and of YouTube's Inferno Fox gaming channel. We are here on YouTube as well as the Inferno cast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. Joining me tonight is my fantastic crew of lovable winners. We have Hardicus. He is one of my good buddies, and he's our resident hill slut, Hardicus. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me.
We also have Simbu Darkfang. He is our level 5 grandpa. He is a primary actor of Basement of the Dead. He is the best player of Fork Knife BRs, and he and his buddies are doing live streaming every Sunday nights and Wednesday nights, with links in the description below to a very special set and larger league involving a custom set of wrestlers and rosters to WWE 2024. Simbu, did I get that right? Anything else that I missed on that?
Yeah, pretty much hit nail on the head. Our first show, if you're listening to this on launch night, is tomorrow, or if you're listening to the next day, it is today. That will be Wizzo's Imagiverse Wednesdays. Every Sunday will be Simbu's Sinister Sundays. We have painstakingly created about 66 scurry face representatives into the game, and we are going to let them duke it out for titles. We're in two shows, just like Raw and SmackDown. For those of you who like WWE, if you enjoyed wrestling, come on over, give us a shot, see what you think. For the most part, we let the AIs play the matches, so we're all hands off. So whatever happens, we are just as surprised as you. The only difference is we know the matches before probably set the matchup before the game starts.
Yeah, and it's a really cool aspect. There's a lot of cross section between video game fans and like wrestling that I've noticed, especially as of recent. Kind of reminds me of like video game fans having a little bit of cross sectional between that and like anime. I don't know if there's a true Venn diagram cross of all three, but there you go. This is a really quality product. I would definitely recommend checking it out. Again, that's every Sunday evening and every Wednesday evening. Links are in the description below.
7 p.m. Central Time.
So yeah, I definitely want to check that out. We also have Stormrosesky of the Twitch and YouTube channels. Stormrosesky. Storm, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and eventually I will have content again in the midst of trying to make one. I have gotten called in for more work, which yay, and we are moving. So I am just, yeah, life has happened. So hopefully this summer though, and maybe before then I should have something up, but there you go.
It's like the line from the movie that Jason 13 hates the most, Life Finds a Way. It's too bad that Jason 13 doesn't like that movie, but
I don't know what you're talking about.
What can you do?
Girl.
Speaking of which, Jason the 13th is here of the YouTube channel, Jason the 13th. Thanks so much for joining us.
Not a problem at all.
And we also have Jamie Owls 87, my partner and partner in crime. Jamie Owls, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me here. I'm glad to be back after having a full week off. Allergies are kind of killing me, and I took a Benadryl, so if I sound sleepy, you'll know why.
a Benadryl, yes.
And
She's just gonna start snoring.
yeah.
It's not like you're on trial or anything. And then last but not least, Astrimedes is off tonight. He is traveling America. So just want to say hey to Astrimedes. We're hoping that you're having a lot of fun and that we miss you. So today's topic is console exclusivity. And before we really get into the meat of it, I want to get Simbu's feedback on a former Xbox exclusive that he played just this past weekend. It was originally released for Xbox consoles and PC, and Simbu was part of the limited beta for the PS5's Sea of Thieves. So Simbu, I want to ask you what your overall thoughts of the game were. Did you enjoy your time, and what you thought worked best, and what you think could be improved?
So, starting out, it's a it's an FPS. It's a first person shooter. I mean, it's kind of first person shooter, adventure, action. So like think Skyrim, but pirates. Um, is kind of more what I would consider the gameplay mechanics of. Now, there's no like level up system or anything like a true RPG or anything like that. But as far as like exploration and open world and things like that, I would consider it a first person Skyrim, for comparison purposes. Then you throw Assassin's Creed Black Flag into the mix because you are spending a lot of time yo-hoing all over the map. One of the cool things I do like is that there's high seas, which is PvE/PvP, but there are safer seas, which is the one I started out on, or I played over the weekend, which is just strictly PvE. There's no other players unless you invite people to your game. Now, the game is going to take some getting used to, especially if you're playing by yourself, because you have to crew the entire ship by yourself. However, you can pick a sloop, which is a 1 to 2 person vessel, which makes it nice because the anchor and the sails and the pitch and the steering and the ship's wheel are all right there on the captain's deck. So you don't have to go across ship or anything like that. But it does take some getting used to it. There is a learning curve to it. You got to pay attention to a lot of different things. Sea combat is very prevalent. It's very, very interesting because your ship doesn't just take damage. Your ship will spring leaks from cannon shots. So through the midst of a battle, you have to load your cannon, then you have to aim it, then you have to fire it, then you have to load it again. Now, if your ship takes a shot, then you have to jump off your cannon. You have to find where the hole is in the hull, and you have to actually repair it. Otherwise, you are taking on, depending on where the hole is, if it's on the bottom of the hull, you are taking on water consistently. And if you take too much, the ship goes down and you lose you lose everything. Safer Seas is a great way to start out. They do have a tutorial called Maiden Voyage. However, it's really not, it's a great way to kind of know what the mechanics are, but it's not a great way to put them into practice. So, like there's no real combat in Maiden Voyage. There's no real distress while you're sailing the end of the tutorial portion before you start into the game. But if you want to know, like, oh, this is where the pitch for the sails is. This is how you raise and lower. This is where you can raise and lower your sails. This is where your anchor. This is where your wheel. This is the decks of your ship. That's a great place to start. I would recommend it for everybody just to get familiar with where and what things are going to be expected of you when you get into the game. However, your best bet is once you're done with that, and it's going to be hands-on learning. Like I said, it is a learning curve. I went up against AI multiple times on the sea, and I got my tail kicked. 9 out of 10 battles.
Wow.
Because again, there is a lot to do, especially when you're by yourself. If I had, like, let's say I had Inferno Fox, let's say I had you on the ship, you could load cannons and I could control where the ship is, what direction the ship is going, make, maneuvers to try and, pitch the ship in a good angle for you. You could run around and repair the ship as it's being taken on water. But when you got to do it all by yourself, it is a task. So be prepared for that. I'm getting the game because I have a few other people in Scary Face that are planning on doing it as well. and it's just going to be fun to, do pirate shenanigans together. Safer Seas is a drawback because it's not PvP. You get only 30% of what you would gain in high seas.
Oh, dang.
So,
but it's a good
again,
start off point. It sounds like. Okay.
Especially if you're interested in just trying to play and explore, and you don't want to be bothered by, Hillbilly. Here comes Hillbilly Hardkiss with his pirate legend, and one shot, one shot blows like 6 holes in your your ship.
Ooh.
And again, they have all different type of cannonball types, and really cool. They have like chain shot, which can disable a mast. They have something that disables like a shot that you hit and it disables like your rudders, so you can't steer. Another one disables cannons of your opponent. So there's a lot to learn, but that 10th battle, I did sink that enemy AI ship, so I was proud of myself. Only took me 10 fights.
And the fact that you're doing it all by yourself when this is meant to be like a you can play it and potentially succeed by yourself, but if you've got a crew, and that's literally the point of sailing and being a pirate, is that you've got a trusted crew. If you have that, imagine how successful you can and possibly would be with that. So yeah, this is really interesting because Sea of Thieves itself was released back like 6 years ago in 2018, and now we've got it coming to Sony's console system. And this is just one of many games in the exclusive Xbox library that Microsoft has deemed fit to move to other consoles. Since I don't own an Xbox system, I have instead the PS5, Nintendo Switch, and a Steam Deck. I've got pre-orders for a number of these Xbox exclusives, used to be exclusives, that are going to these systems. Like I've got pre-orders for Hi-Fi Rush, Pentiment, and honestly, I am eyeing getting into Sea of Thieves with Simbu. So, but we're going to turn the clock back a bit and kind of start with console exclusivity from the 3rd generation. Yeah, there was there were some exclusives and everything like that with like the Atari and ColecoVision and everything like that. But let's start with the true renaissance of video games. Again, that being the 3rd gen. And this generation was pretty much owned by the original NES. We didn't hear anybody complaining about missing Alex Kidd on the NES or Super Mario on the Sega Master System. It was pretty much all NES all the time. It's really the 4th generation that console exclusivity really became a thing, at least I feel. It was fueled here in North America by the simple statement and marketing ploy, Genesis does what Nintendo don't. As a kid and Nintendo fanboy, and I've said this before in previous casts and videos of mine, that statement pissed me the hell right off, and it caused me to write off all Sega Genesis games, save Sonic the Hedgehog. And I have to, and hindsight in 2020, that was a really dumb decision to make. Well, probably one of my stupidest decisions as a video gamer. Yes, there were games that appeared both on the SNES and Sega Genesis, like Earthworm Jim, Joe and Mac, Super Smash TV, and more. But each system had their own strengths and even versions of the games that appeared on both. I'm not going to talk about the differences between like the SNES and Genesis version of these same releases like Aladdin or Mortal Kombat. Instead, we're going to talk about the actual exclusives that only appeared on one system versus the other. If there's one thing that exclusivity seems to breed, it's a bit of ingenuity that comes with the makers of the game taking advantage of that specific console's strength. And kind of opening this up here, and Hardicus, let me ask you this question. What console exclusive video game did you enjoy the most on the Sega Genesis? And then how about on the SNES? And you might be muted,
Hardicus. Away, or he's still muted.
No, I'm here for some reason. But didn't click on the Zoom thing.
Yeah,
Sorry.
He fell asleep.
It is getting close to my bedtime. For Sega exclusivity, Shining Force 1 and 2 were probably my top games on the Genesis. Beyond Oasis was probably a close runner-up. I loved like those tactics games, and Shining Force 1 and 2 still to this day remain some of my most favorite games ever. For the SNES, I mean, Inferno, you know me, Final Fantasy 3 was my top game of all time. But other than that, Link to the Past was, you know, a masterpiece. Chrono Trigger and the Breath of Fire 1 and 2, all on the SNES, were just excellent games.
So the follow-up on that is Shining Force 1 and 2 on the Super Nintendo. Do you think that was doable? Would you have seen Legend of Zelda or Final Fantasy 3 on the Sega Genesis?
I've never been one for like nitpicking the power of each system, especially back then. I really didn't care. I don't see either system handling either of those games. I mean, Link to the Past was probably one of the more like smooth movement games in my opinion for back then. So like Shining Force was, you're kind of moving on a tactical battlefield. There wasn't a whole lot of flashy animations or anything like that. So I think Shining Force 1 and 2 would have been perfectly fine on there. Beyond Oasis, I think probably would have done the same, even though it was a little bit more like animated and movement. And Genesis, I don't see why any of the games I listed couldn't play on the Genesis either.
Yeah, and you mentioned a lot of like the RPGs or even like adventure RPGs in the instance of like Link to the Past. So I could definitely see that.
Oh yeah, my list is definitely RPG heavy on like all systems.
Jason, how about you? Same question. Console exclusive video game you enjoyed the most on the Sega versus the SNES?
Well, I never owned a Sega myself, so just like you. So I only got to play a handful of games. And every game that I did play on the Sega, I pretty much only knew was on Sega. So, of course, I remember playing like, although, nope, I take that back. There were two games that I can recall being on both systems, not just the Sega. But for the most part, like I said, I've said before, Comic Zone was one of my favorites. I don't remember that being on the other systems, only on Sega. Oh my gosh, now I'm drawing a mind blank. Of course, Sonics are always great, and back then they were console exclusive until Sega spread that to all the other stuff. So, but yeah, for Sega, it's really, I don't remember a ton of them that were like, oh my gosh, it could only be Sega. Maybe Sonic, depending with how quick you move around the stages. Although Super Nintendo probably could have kept up with that without a problem.
Are you sure it didn't have blast processing like the
Well,
Genesis did?
That's true. Like I said, I didn't have the Sega. I didn't know all the specs and everything for it. So then again, it may have been too quick for the Super.
I think I saw
But
something about like somebody actually porting Sonic the Hedgehog 2 to a Super Nintendo like ROM sort of thing and to see how well, and apparently like it can do it, but the fast motion does present like some sort of like stuttering, but it's not like awful or anything like that. It's just it can run, but it just
enough that you notice it, but not enough that it was annoying as all can be.
yeah, like it's not a total detriment, but you can notice it versus the smooth action that the Genesis has. Jamie Owls, how about you? I think you had told me before in the past that you guys had a Sega Genesis, right?
Yeah, we did. We had Sega, we had the SNES. For Sega, the games that I really enjoyed playing were, of course, the Sonic games. Toe Jam and Earl. Trying to think, I'm drawing a blank now too, so I'm gonna use a trusted Google right now to help me remember.
It's got to be Booger Man, right?
Oh God, no.
Um,
No.
I think that was on the SNES too.
Was
I
it?
think
Okay.
so. Yeah, those are the games I played for Sega, but for the SNES, of course, was The Lion King. Oh, that's what I had on the SES. The Lion King game. Um, Super Mario World, Super Mario Kart, of course, Star Fox, Street Fighter. Yeah, I mostly play a lot of Nintendo games more than the Sega, honestly. I
And
have
it's
more
funny.
good mem
It's funny because some of the Genesis games, like Star Fox, I want to say there was a Genesis type of equivalent that sort of had that same sort of Super FX look that it tried to mirror. But I can't think of the name of it, but I've seen like one or two
Yeah.
Genesis games with that. I can't think of it. If you're listening to us on the various platforms or watching on Spotify, yeah, watching on YouTube, make sure you let us know in the comments below because I can't seem to remember that. Um, Simbu, so I know you had said you hadn't had a lot of experience with the Sega Genesis and the Super because you were more younger and you didn't have those systems if I remember right.
I had a Genesis, and it saddens me that my best video game memory ever was forgotten. Um, the only reason I had, of course, I only had a Genesis. I went from Atari to Genesis. I never had a SNES, but the school I went to did, and so for extended care, which is basically like what a daycare is nowadays, we were able to play those games, and of course I'd play them at Jason the 13th's house randomly here and there. SNES, I would have to probably say Kirby All Stars or Kirby Superstar. Sorry. Um, that was probably my favorite SNES. Um, and if we're going for exclusive, I believe that Jason is right with Comic Zone. I don't recall that being on the SNES or seeing that SNES. The other one nobody has said yet is good old Vector Man for
never
the
played it.
Genesis.
Yeah,
Vector Man was a fun.
I just played through that like a year and a half ago for the first time. So it's interesting too. It's a whole thing where the games like Vector Man really led with that sort of action based gameplay where the strength of the Genesis being like an arcade based machine where they drew their strength from Sega's known architecture from its arcade type history and like you like with that as like the background you can really tell that with just the crunchiness and the solid controls and platforming and everything with games like Vector Man and like Gunstar Heroes and even Contra Hardcore, like really great experiences where there's crazy bullet hell going everywhere and it's just very very solid. I with Super R-Type that just got added to the NSO, like I love that game and especially the music, but I totally forgot how poorly the Super Nintendo handles that kind of like high level action because as soon as there's more than like 5 bullets on the screen, the frames per second goes from like 30 or 24 or whatever it was to like 8. And in a way, it becomes a thing where yes, it's a shmup and one shot you're dead, but it's its own sort of cheat because it slows everything down and you can then be able to react to things a lot quicker to where if the game was running at even 24 frames per second the whole time, like the Genesis could with games like uh, Super Thunder, was it Thunder Force, Lightning Force. Um, the Genesis just killed it action wise with those various shmups and whatnot. Storm, how about you? What were your favorite exclusives with the Genesis versus the Super, if you can recall? And I'm already saying you can't say Miss Pac-Man. You can't say Miss Pac-Man.
I don't.
Only because of frickin' Super Nintendo releasing it like the great Genesis version like 6 years after it came out on the Genesis for the
Yep.
Super.
Yep. Well, the only other thing that I played on the Genesis was Sonic. So it was
Sonic's so
Miss
good.
Pac-Man and Sonic. But I love Sonic, so that one's fun. For the SNES, it was until it recently got its redo, Super Mario RPG. That is by far, hands down, my favorite game on that console.
And it could be it could be argued whether or not the Genesis could have done that, because they did do Sonic 3D Blast, and that was a game. It was a game, but it was still that 3D isometric style, and I believe it released around the same time, and it also got ported to the Sega Saturn. Like I think that same year or something like that. So the Saturn version, of course, is the better one, since it's the newer-ish system. But look, let's move forward a generation, because this is where stuff really gets interesting. And the fifth generation sees freshman player Sony PlayStation just own the charts, something that would become the norm for the next several generations. So the fifth generation sees Sony win the battle against the Nintendo 64 and Sega Saturn. The latter was a lot bigger in Japan, the Saturn, though Sega never got a foothold here in North America. That was, of course, thanks in part to Sony Computer Entertainment America President Steve Race's statement, the price heard around the world in 1995's E3. And that was him proclaiming $299. That's all he came up to the podium to say and give his presentation on the Sony PlayStation. $100 less than the Sega Saturn, pretty much helped to knock it out of that generation before it could really get started.
Yep.
So you got Sony with a ton of exclusives for their system, from 3D action platformers like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Tomb Raider, stealth and racing games. So you got stealth like Metal Gear Solid racing, like Gran Turismo. It's really it's not a small wonder why Sony has such great success. It should be worth noting that now, today, out of all those properties that I've said, if you even throw something like Final Fantasy in there, only Gran Turismo remains a Sony console exclusive. So throughout this whole time, of course, me, Mr. Idiot, stayed faithful to the Nintendo the Nintendo 64, like the wonderful fanboy that I was. Not like there weren't bangers on the 64, but the whole huge wide library on the PS1 made it such a phenomenally strong system. And with how much I love JRPGs, I missed out on a lot of really great games because I skipped the PS1 and stuck with the 64. So with me admitting my idiocy, let me ask my team here to not do that, and instead let me know what console exclusive game you enjoyed the most on the PlayStation and what you enjoyed the most on the 64. So Jamie Owls, let me start with you. What game did you like the most on the PlayStation, and why is it Spyro? And how about the 64?
I was thinking about PlayStation, like which one I was gonna pick. Is it gonna be Spyro or Tomb Raider? I would say it would be Spyro, because all the games I've collected for PlayStation 1, I had good memories, but of course Spyro is the one that I looked forward to the most playing, because even though the mythical creature, but it still has like animals in there, and I like Nintendo 64, my brother owned, and I played a few of the games that he owned. I don't recall ever getting a 64 game. I just played mostly what my brother had. Of course, it was GoldenEye, Mario 64, Cruis'n USA, 1080, and he had a couple of Star Wars games that I played. I can't remember the title, so forgive me on that.
Squadron, I think.
I think so. I think that's the one.
I believe Pod Racer was N64, as well as Shadows of the Empire.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I asked Dr. Google, and that and Rogue Squadron were the first two that came up.
The Road one I used to play, and I think there's a couple others I can't really recall, but yeah, those were the good days.
Simbu, how about you? I don't recall the amount of experience you've had with the PS1 or the 64.
Oh, mystery. Hey.
Hmm.
I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. Anybody who knows me should be no surprise at my PS1 game, and that would be Star Wars Jedi Power Battles or Powers Battle. Such a fantastic two-player co-op Jedi Star Wars game on the PS1.
Not Hello Kitty
Uh,
Express?
no, that was
Oh, you're
Jason
right.
the
That was
13th.
mine. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
That was
no.
me.
Of course, I just mentioned Shadows of the Empire. That was a fantastic 64 game. I could go again, GoldenEye, just like Jamie Owls and probably most of us here in this chat. I'm also going to say Perfect Dark, which Jason the 13th knows that I played, and I played the hell out of because I had to swap N64s with him because he had the expansion pack and
Yes,
I
I
didn't.
did.
And the only way to play Perfect Dark was to have the expansion pack.
Mhm.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, the different Star Wars games and for our listeners, we're going to be touching upon Star Wars in a very future episode. So hopefully, may the fourth be with you. But it's really interesting just the different quality that there is between both systems and how unique a lot of these games were for that. It was a really interesting generation, one that doesn't get a lot of credit, but also one that, depending on the game, didn't really age all that well. Storm, I know that you guys had the 64. Any experience with the PlayStation?
We had PlayStation 2.
Okay.
So
We'll touch upon the PlayStation 2 momentarily.
but
Favorite 64 games?
Banjo-Kazooie, Diddy Kong
Mm.
Racing, Mario Kart, and Super Smash Brothers.
Yes. Did you ever play Paper Mario?
No, I have not.
I got to get you to play that. It's the unofficial sequel to Super Mario RPG. It's not, it is, there are certain themes and whatnot that sort of follow it, but it is not the same game. Like
Nope.
you'd think
Not at all.
you'd think it'd be so kiddie, and maybe it is a little bit, but it is so good.
Storm, it's funny you say Smash Brothers. That was one of mine until I played Inferno Fox.
But that is why it's one of my favorites, because I have a lot of good memories getting my butt kicked by Inferno Fox with that game. And but that is why.
Now, Jason the 13th, how about you?
All right, this is where I get to kind of beat you in one way, but in one way you still beat me because, well, that time Sony was the big thing, and we had a lot more Sony stuff than Nintendo 64 because at that time I was the only one who bought the 64, and I only bought myself a handful of games for it. So I didn't have the extensive collection for the games, but Smash Brothers, Donkey Kong, Mega Man at that time because Legends came out, and that was, I love the Legends game. I'm still sad that they canceled Legends 3. But for the PlayStation, like I said before, Vandal Hearts came out on that. I was killed that game. Another one for the RPG stuff, Lunar Silver Star Story. That was an awesome game for the PlayStation. But yeah, there was so much. Like I know you mentioned about Resident Evil was on both systems.
Yeah, that and Mega Man
I didn't
Legends
even
1.
I don't remember that Resident Evil was on the 64 at all. So to me, that was a PlayStation exclusive that we killed, even though it really wasn't.
And it was only Resident Evil 2, not
Oh,
1, not
that's
3.
why. That's why. But yeah, Resident Evil 1. Yep.
Did you try the Mega Man Legends on the PS1 or just the 64 version?
I think I had both.
Do you remember which one you liked more?
And I don't. They were pretty similar, and I know have a lot of the Mega Man Legends 2 and Tron Bonds game in my head from the PlayStation that I'm trying to think, because I know that I got addicted to the Legends games with the 64 though.
It's funny because like this generation, it was some of the least amount of instances where there weren't like the same game on both systems.
Mhm.
And it was just because of how different they okay, the reality is that it was the size where a CD could hold 650 megabytes. The biggest cartridge could hold 64 megabytes, and it would cost the consumer an arm and a leg. I think that's why Mortal Kombat Trilogy for the Nintendo 64, I think that's why that was $90 when that
Ooh,
released.
that could be.
Besides
this is-
Resident Evil 2 and Mega Man Legends 64, the game that I have played for both systems, and this is probably the best game on both systems, absolutely, is Mortal Kombat Mythologies Sub-Zero. I mean, you want to talk about just the best gameplay and cinematics. I mean, you got some of the best
Yeah.
screenshots and pictures of movies in the Nintendo 64 and the best acting in the actual movie itself. I mean, this is Jean-Claude Van Damme like Street Fighter like movie quality. You can't get any better than Mortal Kombat Mythologies. Best of both worlds on both systems. I give it a 5 out of 7. Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe more like a 1.5.
Uh, Hardicus, how about you? What was your go-to for the PlayStation and the 64?
Okay, this is gonna take a second, so bear with me. PlayStation, like Jason, phenomenal system, and there's no way I could ever narrow it down to one game. Vandal Hearts, excellent game.
Yes.
Suikoden at 1 and 2, excellent games. Final Fantasy 7 and 9.
Mm-hmm.
Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Wild Arms, Parasite Eve. I mean, there were so many good games for that system. But if I had to narrow it down, like probably the Legacy of Kain series was one of my favorites back then. Into the consoles after that, it has been one of my favorite game series of all time.
So,
Now,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
It's interesting. I noticed about a half or a little over a half were sprite-based looking games. Am I right?
Yeah, Vandal Hearts, Suikoden, Breath of Fire, Wild Arms. They're all well. Wild Arms really wasn't as much, but you know, Suikoden, Vandal Hearts absolutely were. Breath of Fire, if I remember correctly, was. I like that old school RPG look, man.
And the PS1 really nailed that. Like it really nailed
yeah.
the high level detail, and you had the awesome quality of music and everything like that. Okay, so sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
What about
you're all good.
The 64 for you?
Okay, I'm just gonna put this out there. This is my personal opinion.
Superman 64?
This is just personal opinion. Don't attack Inferno Fox. I think the N64 was an ugly system. It had ugly games, and I think it was terrible overall.
Why did we let him on this podcast?
Somebody's gonna say something.
Why is he here again?
As for the system looking ugly, I won't attack that. But the games now, there were some really good games on the 64.
See,
I have a 64. I've got a couple of games for the 64. I could never get into any of them. I could not stand the way any of them looked.
I will absolutely defend what Hardicus is saying because and remember I think I had like I didn't have a lot. I only had like 20 or 30 64 games, but like this is the generation that aged the poorest.
Now that I will agree with.
All of them, and nearly all of the games that Hardicus had mentioned all aged gracefully because they were on the PS1. They involved sprite-based looks and everything like that. They aren't all RPGs. He did mention Symphony of the Night, and that aged particularly well, especially if we look at the voice acting and the script. I mean, what is a man if not a miserable pile of secrets? But in all seriousness, the game looked great and it ran fantastic, and it was The music was phenomenal, and that's kind of what whereas like everything with the 64 was very low res, polygonal, and to its credit though, it was really it often was really it was really colorful, very quick action, barely any loading, and the most important of all with the 64 is you always felt like you were in a Silent Hill game because of all the fog.
I will defend Hillbilly on this one as well. And my basis for comparison is Resident Evil 1 versus Perfect Dark. Just
So
compare the two graphically. The poorness of the polygonal structure of the enemies and the horrendous face matting on Perfect Dark versus what you saw with Resident Evil.
yeah, at worst, Resident Evil had that kind of pixelated look, like that meme you see with Final Fantasy VIII. Oh, you're the best looking guy here, and it zooms into the Squall's face, and it's all pixelated. Resident Evil was kind of like that. But games like Resident Evil and Final Fantasy VII had those pre-rendered backgrounds. Uh, the 64 had that a little bit, but the 64 was playing with more open areas, and that's where its greatest asset, the fog, was really able to roll in there perfectly. See what I did there? Roll in there. So it was really
Dad joke.
to the 64's benefit. Now, do I like more of the 64's games than the PlayStation? I just by sheer numbers, I would say yes, but there are so many PlayStation 1 games that I just haven't played that it's not a fair competition.
I'll
And
give you a
this
list.
exactly. Honestly, you're totally right. Like if I actually created a list of the games, the 64 is going to be, you know, I'm gonna have to think about that. I'll have to get back to you guys on that. Now I'm really curious. Let's move on to the next generation, because we went from a generation where it was less exclusive to the totally opposite end of the spectrum, where we started to see the floodgates open up, where console exclusivity is still there, but it was a lot less so, because it saw Sega leaving the console market with its last console, the Sega Dreamcast, and nearly the entire library had been ported, many of them appearing on other consoles like the Xbox, the original Xbox, the PS2, and the GameCube. And it was one of those things where, like, yeah, Nintendo had a lot of the properties were obviously Nintendo first parties, they all stayed there, but a lot of the Sony IPs that I mentioned went third party, and that includes the likes of Tomb Raider, who its first time out of a Sony system was in 1999 on the Dreamcast with Last Revelation. We saw Final Fantasy get back to Nintendo with Final Fantasy Tactics Advance and Crystal Chronicles in 03. And then, of course, a great number of third-party companies saw them publish games on all three consoles. You saw Capcom get back to Nintendo. Yeah, they were there with like Mega Man Legends, but you saw Konami really get there with get back there. You had the excellently awful Castlevania 64 2 games, but they got back to the GameCube. And then you had sports games. The 64 didn't really have too many sports games. I mean, they had NBA Courtside, I think NFL Blitz, but I believe that was it. And then the GameCube finally got the Madden series. It got the Tony Hawk games. It got the Soul Calibur games. It got the Mortal Kombats. And the GameCube was able to stick the landing on all of these. But the PS2 was there with all of them and then some. So I'm going to ask you guys, what are some of your favorite exclusive video games from this generation? And we got some exclusives like, and when I say exclusive, I just mean this generation. So you got examples like you got God of War, you got the numbered Final Fantasy series 10, 11, and 12. You've got the Xbox ones, Forza, Halo 1 and 2. Simbu, in case you don't know, I know you don't know that much about the series called Halo. Halo features you know all about Halo, so I'd probably guess that might be one of your favorites for that. Of course, all the first party Zelda ones. You got KOTOR for Star Wars, Shadow of the Colossus PS2. So Hardicus, let me ask you, what are some of your favorite exclusives for this generation?
For this generation, Final Fantasy X, the last good Final Fantasy. That was one of the high ones. Kingdom Hearts, the Ratchet and Clank series, the Legacy of Kain series continued on the PlayStation 2 also. Excellent games. SSX, which I know might be a surprise for some of you because, sports ball games kind of thing, not really my thing, but I loved SSX. I literally bought an Xbox just for Fable. I ended up buying also Blue Dragon, and there was another one that I cannot remember the name of it offhand, but those were the only games I ever had on Xbox.
Probably Lost Odyssey or
Yeah, I do believe it was Lost Odyssey. That does sound familiar.
and I will mention that SSX was actually also on the GameCube and Xbox.
Oh, was it? Okay.
The only reason that I pulled Dr. Google on that was because I could have sworn when Jamie Owls and Jason and I were at the gaming convention that I saw a GameCube box of that. That's the only reason why I'm like,
Okay.
I could have sworn I've seen that. But I bet you it ran great on the PS2.
Oh, it was loads of fun. I really loved SSX and SX Tricky. I had a GameCube. I had one of the Mario games. I want to say Paper Mario, but I can't really remember because I ended up selling my GameCube to, I think, end up getting a PS3 or something like that. So GameCube really was not on my radar very much.
That's fair. Jason, you're going to be interesting on this because you had at least two of the three systems. Your brother had the third.
No, I had all three.
You had all three?
Oh, yes. So the Dreamcast, I only had a handful of games. And for the few that I had, I love the Evolution games. Love them. As far as I know, they've only been on the Dreamcast. They've never been ported to anything else. Other than that, again, I had the Sonic Adventures, which was a great game on the Dreamcast.
And then those got ported to the
right.
GameCube.
Yep, those got ported. I think I had one of the Dead or Alives also, but again, Dead or Alive's been on other stuff. So, but as far as I know, the Evolutions are the only ones that were Sega Dreamcast only games that I had. It's like I said, I've never seen them on anything else. So,
nice.
As for GameCube and PlayStation 2, oh my God, the list of games are so long that I have for each one of them. Hell, the original Devil May Cry's were awesome did they have that on Xbox though?
I think so.
Were those on Xbox? Because I don't remember.
I have to employ Dr. Google on that, but go ahead and
If I
continue.
remember correctly, the first DMC game that showed up on Xbox was 4.
Oh wow. Okay, so the first few would be PlayStation only then.
Yeah,
it didn't appear.
It didn't appear on the 360 until 11 years later on a Devil May Cry collection.
Ah, nice. Now I did play the Shadow of Colossus, right? Yep, I did play that. That was actually really good. It was short, but it was like 12 boss battles in a row, basically. But yeah, PlayStation, most of the games on PlayStation, that's where Disgaea started.
Yep.
For the longest time, and I fell in love with Disgaea, so that would be up there in my top. At that time, exclusive only. Now Disgaea is on on the Switch at least. I don't think Xbox has them at all.
Yeah, I'm not too sure on that. Jamie Owls.
Think so.
I know that you didn't. I don't believe you had a GameCube or the original Xbox. You did have the PS2. What was your favorite exclusive for the PS2?
For the PS2, I remember having a couple of the Sim games on a console. I never had a PC, so I never played the Sims on the PC at all, but I had a few on the console. There's a Pets one, the original, and one was called The Sims 2. A couple of other Tomb Raider games that came out for the PlayStation 2, Tomb Raider Legend, which I loved, Tomb Raider Underworld. What's another one? I had a Jack Skellington Nightmare Before Christmas game on there, and I really enjoyed that one. Honestly, to tell you the truth, I didn't have a whole lot of PlayStation 2 games. I also think I had a couple of racing games. I had the Homer Simpsons Hit and Run on there.
Oh yeah, that was for all the consoles too.
Yeah, yeah, that's about it. Like, surprisingly, I didn't have like a whole bunch, but at that time though, I was just only like interested in a particular game. Like, I didn't have a whole variety of collections. But yeah, I only had the PlayStation in my teen years. PlayStation 2, excuse me.
And Simbu, how about you? What was your absolute favorite for this generation? And does it rhyme with Schmalo?
No, it doesn't actually. Hardicus actually said it. My favorite of that generation for console exclusivity was
Fable.
Fable.
That was
Back
one of the
when-
few games for the Xbox I had to.
Of
Back when
course,
Peter Molyneux knew what he was doing.
Yes.
of course, Halo 1 and 2. If I'm not mistaken, it only came out on GameCube, and I believe that was the one Mega Man collection of all of them up until that point.
Was
If I
that the
remember correctly.
Mega Man Anniversary Collection?
Yes, I believe up until that point, I think it only came out for GameCube.
It did come out on the PS2 at the same time, but that's okay. It's still it's still valid because it's a good game.
But PS2 kept all the Mega Man X's going exclusively on their system.
And I'm going to pull the generational card here because I am going to say Devil May Cry, and I'm going to count that the original 3 do count because those were PlayStation exclusive
Yes,
at the time.
absolutely. They absolutely. I'm surprised you didn't say
somebody
God of War
saying-
is one of your favorites.
No, God of War.
Ooh,
I mean,
God of
God
Wars
of
were
War was
great.
kind of there. At the time, though, I wasn't big into the PS2. I was more on the Xbox at that time, so I didn't really experience God of War until after that era. So I wasn't going to count it. But yes, if we're going to go ahead and go into future, then yes, God of War does make my list.
Because that at the time it was PS2 exclusive. Even if you played it on the PS3, for example, if you did, it still counts. The original ones on the PS2 that got ported.
Right. Okay, then yeah. But yeah, that's basically, I never owned a Dreamcast. Never played a Dreamcast. Even after Jason the 13th found the Dreamcast on a Amnesty Day, still never played it. But yeah, and a little throwback to anybody who was at Halo Nights. There was one big phrase with a call and response that only 2 of us said. I won't name the second party, but it was, "I thought I told you before I owned you." Those who were there will remember that being called out between me and this other person all the time.
Yeah, and I'm still waiting for Sega to do a Dreamcast Mini. It's like, come on, Sega, get with it. I would buy one just to experience that library and everything.
It feels like Sega just wrote off the Dreamcast and they're like, we want to forget about this system ever existing.
Speaking of the Dreamcast, one of the best games ever, Marvel vs. Capcom 2.
Oh my
That
God,
was,
yes.
like, fantastic. One of the best fighting games ever.
What is that? I've never heard of that.
Marvel vs. Capcom 2? Come
I've never heard of that. Not like you ever owned me on that and took wicked umbrage of it, knowing how much I would beat you on Smash Brothers, and not like you enjoyed beating me at that.
Oh, for how many times you just whooped me on Smash Brothers, that was how much I whooped people on Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I would let people pick my characters and just destroy them with them.
Kind of like Inferno Fox does with us.
Pretty much.
Storm, I remember that you guys had the PS2. Did you guys have an original Xbox and GameCube?
No. to neither one of those. We got the Xbox 360 later, but no, the GameCube we never got. But we had the PlayStation 2, and my favorite games on it were Frequency and Amplitude.
Yeah,
So,
those are fun.
Yep. So playing Fortnite Festival just, reminds me of playing those a whole lot. And Kingdom Hearts also on the
So
PlayStation
good.
2 was fun. Yep. Those were great games, but everything else I don't have any experience with.
And
So,
it's funny. So like now, if we fast forward, what like
Ooh,
20
hey,
years?
real quick before you go on to the next one, and I'll shout out to all Nintendo exclusives, but I have to bring up Pikmin. I love Pikmin.
Oh, Pikmin.
And it started on the GameCube. So I had to bring that up real quick before you moved on.
Yeah, I never really got into Pikmin.
Yeah, it's basically
all.
it's like all puzzle. It's like a Lemmings puzzle game.
And it's funny, I like lemmings and I like puzzles, so you would think that'd be up my alley, but so now we're nearing the currently, if we fast forward 20 years and get to where we're at, we're nearing the end of the life cycle for the Nintendo Switch and what appears to be the halfway point for the PS5 and Xbox Series consoles. And even with these systems running what feels like PC guts within them, there are still exclusives for each of these. So, Storm, I'll start with you as we're wrapping up our discussion. What exclusive game for which console do you enjoy the most?
it's got to be Animal Crossing for the Nintendo Switch. Animal Crossing New Horizons in particular. Ever since it's come out, it has been my warm, fuzzy go-to game for anything. And I just absolutely love it. There are things that they could do to improve the quality of life in the game, but that's, here, neither here nor there right now. I can't wait to see what they do in the future, but that is by far one of my top, just my favorite game. And if I wanted to talk about exclusive to PlayStation, God of War.
Boy.
Yeah, I just absolutely love God of War and God of War Ragnarok. So yeah, I'm a fangirl over those two games, I guess. And the Animal Crossing. So, I love getting sucked into the movie feel of those games, and they did a really good job. Even though I wanted to kill Boy in the first one, and I don't feel as bad about him in the second, but in Ragnarok. But there you go.
Now, could you see a competitor's console or PC run the God of War games that are on the PS4 or 5?
You know what? I probably I could probably see those games on the PS5. Now, I I could not see God of War on the Nintendo Switch in its current state. Maybe when, they come out with their next version of the Switch, maybe then. The Switch just could not handle it. The way that it renders Fortnite in, even I understand that as an online game and you're dealing with downloads and blah 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 blah. I understand all that. However, just that little difference, because once it's in your cache, it should download a little bit faster and my internet's okay and yada yada yada. Oh, it still wouldn't handle it all that well because it's not made for it. So however, I could see Animal Crossing running just fine and looking. I can't say that it would look that much more beautiful because it's a great game for Nintendo. Like Nintendo does Nintendo Chef's Kiss, Their games are Princess Peach's Adventure. I forgot what the proper title of it. Forgive me. It's a fun game. It's beautiful. It is a beautiful game. So it's easy and whatnot. But I could see that running just fine on PlayStation, and but some of the not backwards maybe backwards, the compatibility from PlayStation to Nintendo I could see being an issue, but like Nintendo to other consoles I could see working a lot easier and better.
Yeah, because a good example of that that would be kind of in mine and Hardicus wheelhouse is like Octopath Traveler 1 and 2, and like even Bravely Default, although Bravely Default went to PC instead of the PlayStation. These games are real like sprite heavy sort of looking games. They call them the HD 2D, and they originally released on the Switch, but then of course, Bravely Default is more simple polygonals, but when they make the leap to like a Sony or a PC, like they can just have that look, but in a higher resolution and run 60 frames per second, and it actually have no loading. And it's like, okay, here's this great game, but it just runs better and it looks better and it sounds better. So there you are. Whereas making the leap from Sony to Nintendo, like yeah, there's miracle ports like The Witcher 3, Doom Eternal, but there are compromises and sacrifices that are made, and it's just it's a real note to Nintendo that now's the time. Like if you're not going to do it this year, you absolutely need to do it next year and upgrade to your newest system, because Sony is already there. They're going to be announcing the PS5 Pro. It is imminent and it's coming, probably going to release at the end of the holiday season. So Sony's going to have their next iteration, and Nintendo's going to be missing out on this sort of time to be able to cash in on that while still looking somewhat decent. But of course, there's laws of minimum returns, yada yada yada. But Hardicus, let me call on you here. Like, what exclusive game for which console do you enjoy the most right now?
Well, I don't have a PS5 yet, so I can't really comment, but my guess would be like Spider-Man 2, Horizon, or there was another exclusive one. I thought that was those Ratchet Clank. Those would probably be one of my favorites. Like I played a little bit of the Ratchet and Clank and Spider-Man 2, and they were both excellent.
Nice.
The little bit I played. For the Switch, probably Triangle Strategy. I absolutely love that game. I plan on playing it at least one or two more times just to play through everything. Xbox, haven't had an Xbox in years. I have no desire to get an Xbox. So.
No, that I don't blame you, because it's a thing where I don't really know of the exclusive thing that I have is Game Pass. So.
And I do love the Game Pass. Like I have it on my PC, and it's like the Game Pass has been so great to try out so many indie PC games that it's fantastic. Like games I never would have even given a second thought of. So I do love that part about it. The new Fable that's supposedly coming out would tempt me, but I probably would just stick it with it on the PC.
Yeah, because I think that's where it's also going to be going too.
Okay, I have not read any details about it at all.
Jamie
if
Owls.
you can play,
Oops, sorry.
sorry. If you can play Game Pass on PC for Xbox, I don't see why it wouldn't run on a PC.
Yeah, I think it has been announced for Xbox and PC, the new Fable. I think.
I would not doubt it.
Jamie Owls, how about you? What exclusive game for which console do you enjoy the most? So for the PS5 and your Switch, which game for each did you enjoy the most?
So since I'm more of a PlayStation person, I play more games on the PlayStation than I do on my Switch. I would have to say I really enjoyed the Horizon games. I thought those were really cool and amazing. I'm really not into like robots, but the storyline of those games got me really intrigued. Uh, Ratchet and Clank. I'm trying to think. A Plague's Tale I really liked. Also, I like those dark analogy games, the ones where you have to select. and your storyline changes each time. And of course, I like the horror genre. As for the Switch, trying to think. Trying to think of certain Mario games. Oh, Mario Odyssey. I thought that was really cool. Uh, the Super Mario Deluxe, the one that used to be on the Wii U that got imported to the Switch. Uh, yeah, those are the really games I can think of. But yeah, I think I more enjoy games on the PlayStation.
That's cool. Um, let me ask you, Jason 13th, not the same question. What exclusive game on a competitor's console you don't own you would like to see on a console you do have so you can play it?
Ooh, um, that's a good question because really the only console I don't own is Xbox.
And the funny thing is
So if
you just got the one too. One as well.
yeah, which I only have like 2 games for it, but actually, what Hardicus said, Fable, the new Fable, let it come out for the PlayStation. I would love to play it. That'll be one that I know I won't get Xbox just to play Fable, so because I doubt by then time that comes out, the one will probably won't be able to play that.
Simbu, do you agree with Hardicus and Jason? Is that the game that you could see the exclusive game on a competitor console you'd want to own?
I mean, yeah, realistically, that the Fable is probably the new Fable. I'd have to say would be the only real thing that would interest me. But I'm not going to rush out and buy a $1,000 PC or a $500 Series X just for a Fable machine. I'm not like you Nintendo fanboys that went and bought a Zelda machine.
Yep, had a $300 Zelda machine for the first 6 months or so.
At least we can say that it was a relatively cheap console compared to the others released at the time. But no, that's an excellent point, and it's as we wrap up our console exclusivity thing, we still see today's world being Sony with its current state of games on the PlayStation, and now also going to the PC, and I will say successfully because Helldivers 2 I think still is topping at the highest or some of the highest average concurrent players on Steam, and also quite unsuccessfully because of some of the hot garbage like the Last of Us 1 remake, just how awful that was on the PC. If Sony can kind of get their act together with the whole PC thing, then having a dual way of releasing games, they're going to see a lot of success. And I think that's also I've heard some people argue that's why the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth numbers have been so low. One of the many reasons, because there's a lot of people who have PCs who are just like, I'm just going to wait until it gets ported to the PC. Why would I pick it? Why would I double dip? Just get it once, get it on PC, and I'm good. And you've got Xbox, who's already been doubly doing both at the same time. Their Xbox systems and on the PC, and now they're going on the PS5 and the Switch or the Super Switch when that will get announced. Finally gets announced or whatnot. And then you got Nintendo, who's doing none of that, who's only doing one, and that of course is their own system. So it makes me wonder if there's some reticence on Nintendo's end to jump into the next generation, because the next generation truly means that it's like the level of like PS4 or PS5 level of technology where okay, games are going to take much longer to produce and create, and they have to be more detailed. They're stronger systems, but you got to have the games that can meet that. And what does that mean for game turnaround and just that whole crazy rat's nest. I don't think in our lifetimes we're going to see Mario, Legend of Zelda, or Pokemon games legally on a Sony system. I don't think that's that's going to happen. Jason, you're
Oh,
saying
I
no?
totally agree with that. I don't think Nintendo released their cash crops to the other systems.
Because they're not only about the software, but they're all about selling that hardware too. So,
Hmm.
but so that's our sort of look down memory lane and just a general discussion on console exclusivity. Just want to say a huge thank you to our fantastic cast and crew. We got Hardicus, Simbu, Storm, Jason, Jamie Owls, and myself. Astrimedes having the day off. Make sure you catch us next week for our next episode. Again, that is here on YouTube as well as Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, and more. So thank you guys so much for watching and have a good day.